Lest we forget today is about collapsed buildings, Maria.
That's right. And if you're asking yourself why, lest we forget, we are constantly bombarded with good news, rarely, bad news most of the time. The headlines are dominated by political scandals, corruption, homicides, murders, femicide, etc. And sometimes we may lose track of what's happening. We may forget the things that have cost us lives, that have cost us long-term health, long-term gains in employment, in economy, all of those. So lest we forget is here to remind you that this happened. We need to keep an eye on it. We need to make sure it doesn't happen again. We need to find justice for anyone who lost their life or their source of income or their land, etc. And this week, lest we forget that 14 people died at Nyamakima on January 23rd, 2006. What happened? A 5-story structure that was under construction in Nyamakima, Nairobi, basically collapsed. At least 14 people died, more than 70 were injured, and sometimes those are considered conservative estimates. The building was reportedly constructed without adhering to proper architectural and structural guidelines, and there were substandard materials that were used as well, and there was inadequate supervision. So basically a medley of issues as far as quality is concerned. Now, another accelerating factor was really heavy rains on the night of, and they weakened the poorly constructed foundation already. So by the time that construction workers are getting there, the foundation is already weak, it's shaky. There were rescue efforts that were chaotic at best, slow, of course, because of a lack of equipment. And of course, initially it was the use of bare hands. People were just trying to dig and dig and dig through rubble to rescue a life here and there. And there was basically many interventions that were sought after. But during the initial response, it was very much, trying to salvage what we can, trying to do what we can with what we have. President Mwai Kibaki at the time ordered an investigation into the collapse. And of course, several construction projects were halted all through Nairobi to assess their safety compliance. And of course, there were so many lessons learned, but unfortunately at the cost of many lives. Now, there was about 4 senior officials from the defunct Nairobi City Councils who were charged with negligence. And the owner of the building, Jimmy Kihonge, was also charged with 14 counts of manslaughter. However, the government lost a lawsuit to demolish the building, and Kihonge rebuilt the property as the case continued to drag in court. That's one example of the number of lives we've lost due to either poor quality workmanship, use of substandard materials, a lack of oversight as far as safety is concerned at construction level or even later. Very rarely, sometimes it is due to natural disasters as well. But that is just one example. We've talked about Nyamakima, but there are plenty others, including a building collapse that happened in Huruma, of course, that of course lost several lives. We had another collapse in Nyamakima in 2024, which kind of reminded us of exactly where we've come from and why we need not to go back. These are a few, but the basics are the same. What's happening as far as our construction is concerned, our safety standards. And in studio with us, we have the National Construction Authority Executive Director, Maurice Akech, and we'll be asking him some of those questions. I'll begin with, let's just be honest, how much do you remember about Nyamakima? Has it...
With Nyamakima, 1, 2.
That's unfortunately, that's already something that we have to ask, right?
Exactly.
Let me say Nyamakima 1, 2006.
Yeah.
What do you remember? What comes to mind?
It took many days to get those who had been covered.
Well, the recovery process took a long time.
To just be, and then we either had to invite Israeli experts to come and help us with this, but also looking back into what led to that collapse and the back and forth in the court system, and then the push for us to have a proper system that helps us deal with emergencies, but at the same time regulates the construction sector. That's what comes to mind.
That's what about you, Janet? Do you remember?
Very, very similar. 2006, the recovery efforts and the fact that we needed to be assisted. And by then, I think too much damage and too much loss of life. So that kind of the initial reaction, the disaster response being poor, something that kind of bedevils a lot of the industries in the country, causing more loss of life. And I think that's what we're trying to remember. What do you remember as we invite Maurice to to come into the conversation.
So I realized that maybe it was also a factor of being quite young at the time and not, looking at the news very keenly. But I just realized that when you said Nyamakima, Eric, my first thought was 2024. 2024, yes, not 2006, right? So I had to go dig deep, and then it became fading, like a very vague memory
you could
of
see something.
Yeah, there's something, but it's also a factor of I was trying to think, was there another collapse in pipeline? Was there another? Was there? And I checked each time, and there was indeed. So you're kind of conflating all these things, which means that it's something that we've not tackled if it's happening so often that you can confuse 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, right? But Maurice, do you remember anything about Nyamakima?
Well, I remember everything about building collapses in Kenya.
Right. It's your job.
Because that's what I do. Not that I collapse buildings every day.
No.
I ensure that they don't occur. And thank you for this opportunity, because it's going to give us a moment to reflect, like you've started, and ask ourselves, what steps have we made as a country to avoid these things happening, or to mitigate, or stop them completely.
Right.
And if they are to happen, if any of them to happen, how safe are they going to happen? So at National Construction Authority, and the reason why it was created is basically to stop the menace of buildings collapsing in Kenya.
Right.
The first incident of collapse that was recorded is Sunbeam building, which had existed for many years, and due to lack of maintenance, a canopy which had gathered a number of debris and so on and so forth, and of course had deteriorated in terms of a canopy is an overhang or a cantilever. It fell, and unfortunately, because it was raining, people were taking cover under it. You know what happened. Of course, a commission of inquiry was put up, the Presidential Commission of Inquiry, which conducted a very good inquiry, came up with several recommendations, and of course, thereafter, another one happened, the one you mentioned in Nyamakima, the Nyamakima 1, as you call it, 2006, which had 14 Kenyans lost their lives, unfortunately. And then thereafter, of course, 2011, the government set up National Construction Authority with mandate to oversee and coordinate the development and construction industry in Kenya, with a key responsibility to regulate the sector, to ensure contractors are licensed, using standards that make them do a proper job, to ensure that fundis are accredited, to ensure that projects are registered, to ensure that we conduct training and capacity building, we do adequate research, we do monitoring and quality assurance from time to time on ongoing construction works, and so on. And today, I can tell you, you may see a building collapsing, but if you compare the number of buildings that are standing, I think 99% of buildings are good. But of course, the issue normally is the bad apple inside the many good apples.
99%, you say?
Very good, yes.
Yeah.
Because if I tell you, every year we carry out 30,000 inspections across different projects across the country. And this is not just buildings only, though we focus more on buildings, so they're the majority. We also look at all other sectors of construction, whether it's in roads, whether it's in energy, whether it's in water, name it. Anything you see a contractor handling is under the mandate of National Construction Authority by way of oversighting and ensuring quality compliance. But most importantly, the 14 people you mentioned, unfortunately, from 2006 and way back to 1996, a difference of 10 years, then several years later, 35 years down the line, we have lost more than 200 people in incidents of buildings collapsing. That's a serious loss to a country. We've had loss to the economy, because when those buildings collapse, there's loss to the economy. What is the value of what we have lost? I can give a modest value of about 2.4 billion. That's what has been accounted for. But it could be more, isn't it? And as you speak, unfortunately, the first incident happened in Nairobi, and the one that followed. So we look at Nairobi because it has very many construction activities happening on a day-to-day basis. Actually, more than 30% of constructions in Kenya happen in Nairobi. So Nairobi also has witnessed the majority of collapses in Kenya, building collapsing. Of course, we have the neighboring county, which is also very busy in terms of construction, and that also indicates that statistically is vibrant, and so that's Kiambu. Then we also have Nakuru and Mombasa. These are major counties that construction activities are very vibrant. So that also indicates that why the incidents of collapsing
can happen there. Do you work with the National Building Inspectorate? Is there collaborative?
Yes. So National Construction Authority is a semi-autonomous agency of government, and is domiciled under the State Department of Public Works, which is under the Ministry of Lands, Public Works, Housing and Urban Development. In the State Department of Public Works, there's a directorate which is under the State Department called National Building Inspectorate, which was created way back in 2015 after the Ruma collapse. We started with Nyamakima. Now we're in Ruma. Now, that actually so far has the highest incidence of deaths, if you look at the statistics, the Ruma collapse, remember?
Right.
It also led to some people being taken to account to answer to the issues of collapse. One of them was from my institution, National, because that was about 3 years after NCA formation was formed. And what happened after 2015, there was need to also look at the buildings that are already existing. So there was need to carry out safety audits of buildings that are already existing, and at that time, through a presidential directive, a creation of National Building Inspectorate happened with the key mandate to audit safety of buildings that are already existing. Because as it were, NCA mainly was dealing with the new works, new construction works, and of course, once they are ready and handed over, they need to be continually monitored and checked for condition safety, because safety can be a moving target. Today, the building has been delivered, is ready, is safe, but if it's not well maintained, it may deteriorate, just like the Sunbeam case.
I just want, Eric, I know you want to come in briefly, but just speaking on what you said, so the National Building Inspectorate in 2018, that was, about 7 or so years ago, found that out of 14,895 buildings sampled, 4.8% were very dangerous, 72.3% were classified as unsafe, 8.2% were found to be in fair condition, and 14.7% were categorized as safe. So 72.3% classified as unsafe. And maybe that's somewhere to start, because yes, I hear you saying 99% most of the time, and more often than not, there's safety, we don't have collapses. But this report, 72.3%, this was in 2018, I don't know how much it's shifted then, classified as unsafe, kind of begs the question as to why that even, take us back to how then is somebody allowed a contract, what is that whole process? And then 72% unsafe is quite a jarring number.
I'll say 3 things. Number one, that 72% is on the buildings that were audited. Because audit was focusing on areas that were deemed to have unsafe buildings. And they started with the areas that were more densely occupied in terms of buildings, like the Eastlands part of Nairobi, and the parts that have quite dense buildings in terms of population and settlement. Then, of course, they have also gone to other parts of the country in terms of other counties. So that's number one. And the unsafe, second issue about being unsafe there, when you talk about building safety, the first that comes to mind is structural. But building can also be unsafe on the basis of the habitability. It's not habitable. You've heard of a sick building. You live inside, but every time you go inside, you catch a cold. If you're outside, you feel okay. It's strong, it's standing, but it's not healthy or habitable to live in. It's not safe. There is no adequate lighting. There's no adequate ventilation, air circulation, and so on and so forth. That's an unsafe building, because safety here is not just about something falling on you, even making you get sick is being unsafe. But there was also an item there on the issue of dangerous buildings. What percentage was it?
Dangerous.
Very dangerous buildings.
Yes.
It's 4.8%.
Yes, that's what we need to talk about. Dangerous buildings here now deals with the issues of structural safety. That this one is a candidate of collapse. It can go down anytime. And those ones, for information, majority of them have been taken down to restore safety to the built environment.
Since then, they've been demolished?
Yes, majority have been demolished. And the few that are remaining are still being pursued. Because, as you said, you remember the Nyamakema first one, somebody went to court,
Right.
and you know what happened. So the ones that have not been demolished, there could be some issues here and there to make them not being demolished. But they're still being pursued so that at the end of the day, we can restore safety to the built environment. Now, lastly, our relationship with the National Building Inspectorate, because we belong to the same state department, one is under a directorate, one is a semi-autonomous, which is NCA. We work collaboratively as a multi-sectoral unit, including not just the two of us, but all the other players, regulators, including the county government for where we go for those multi-sectoral site inspection visits, including the enforcement unit, which is the National Police Service, including environmental body NEMA, the disaster management unit, name it. Anyone you think that it's a bit, including the engineers regulatory body, including the architects and conservators regulatory body, and so on and so forth. We work together closely, and we have a committee that from time to time carries out joint inspection.
Where are the gaps, Maurice, in this entire enforcement mechanism? So you at the National Construction Authority, you're also the registrar of contractors.
Yes.
Right? So every contractor who is at a site today has a license from you, or ought to have a license from you.
Yes, every compliant site that's under construction must have a licensed contractor from National Construction Authority.
Okay.
Yes, and the one that's not compliant, you will see the famous red X. That is a mark of non-compliance.
So the X is just showing that it's been inspected and it has found that there's something
is missing.
Something is missing.
Correct. Either a licensed contractor is not there, the project is not registered, or there's no qualified architect, qualified engineer, qualified professional. There is no safety, and many other things. The construction workers are not accredited, or they are not wearing personal protective equipment, the famous PPEs, or the helmet, as you called it today. I'm wearing one, and so on and so forth.
So then, why do we still see buildings collapsing? Just search buildings collapsed in Kenya on Google. Go to news, and you'll see. All right, building collapsed in Kawa West in October last year.
Yes,
we had another building collapse earlier in May last year. 4 rescued, several trapped as demolished building collapses in Kenya, and so on and so forth. Not just in Nairobi, not just in the areas of Kiambu, like you said, these big urban areas, but also in rural areas. Why do we still see buildings collapsing? Getting to a point where it started construction, it has gone to story number 1, story number 2, ghorofa ya 3, ya 4, ya 5, and then it comes down. Where are you as this thing is happening?
Interestingly, most buildings, we have categories of buildings that collapse. Some that are already completed and occupied, and some that are still under construction. So if you look at the buildings that collapse after they are completed and occupied, that accounts for about 66%. They have been completed, they're in use, and a few years down the line, they come down for certain reasons, either because of failure, lack of maintenance. But the ones that I also want to focus on are the ones that are also under construction. And you're asking the gaps. This points to maybe some of the weaknesses we can talk about in terms of maybe regulations and enforcement. One of them could be, and during your opening remarks, you mentioned it, we have a very interesting industry where we have so many players. The value chain is quite long. And all these players must do their thing right to make sure that nothing wrong happens in the building. From the point of extracting the material, from the quarry, for the ones that get from the quarry, to the point of manufacturing it at the factory, and to the point of delivering it to site for construction. All that process requires what we call quality control, isn't it? So lack of that coordination will have an impact. So there is need to have what we call an updated legal framework around that issue. And if you ask me, that's what we've also been working on as NCA to ensure that we have a robust legal framework, what we call the National Building Code 2024, which was published last year and will become effective 1 year later, which is this year, March. A copy is here. this one. I carried it for, so that...
this booklet.
This booklet. It's a very important booklet going forward. And it will cure some of the issues we are seeing. So because we've not had this updated since 1968, the one that we've been having is a 1968 code, which is going to be replaced by this effective 1st March 2025, will be a game changer. Because it defines how a building should be done, that there need to have mandatory structural design with a qualified structural engineer, issues of foundations, issues of geotechnical investigation, soil investigation basically, where you're going to put the building, and many things. So it's talking about order and safety around construction sites.
So this is an upgrade.
This is an update.
That looks at our current, situation and takes factors in advancements in technology and all.
Yes.
It is not coming in a vacuum.
Yes.
It is replacing an existing one.
Correct.
Old as it may be, there has been a regulatory framework. Are we saying that that regulatory framework was so bad that it was impossible for you to enforce? Are you saying that that regulatory framework was enforced, but it had very many gaps? You could only enforce up to this, and the reason it was collapsing is because this other part had no regulatory framework?
I think I can talk of gaps that were there. One of the gaps was the rigidity that is there in the old code, in the one that we are replacing with this one. The rigidity in the sense that if you look at the world today, even in terms of materials, quite a number of new materials have come in place, but they're not embedded in the code. So people will use what they need to use to get what they need to get without any guideline in the standards. That has been cured by ensuring that we just define what we call material must meet certain strength requirements, must meet certain fire rating requirements, so that when the burning, last week you said you are discussing fire.
Yeah.
So here, this also talks the issue of fire safety and so many other things. So to the extent of the gaps that existed in that one, they are being cured through this. We've also had issues of climate change conversation. This also talks about sustainable design, so that it meets issues of climate change and resilient designs. You know, one of the things that has existed before is designs that are not resilient. Resilience here means that it's a design that can withstand any natural calamity, like, for instance, earthquakes. It's defined here. It's not going to be the discretion of the designer or the developer. Talk about wind.
It's all set out.
Talk about floods.
No.
Like last year, we had issues of floods. So going forward, you will have to assess the risk of flood before you do your building, so that if the floods were to come, your building is resilient and they will not affect you. You still use it despite the disaster that's around you.
Engineer, we hear you.
Yes.
And we believe every word you're saying. You're Kenyan. We have very many laws. The implementation and enforcement of those laws is where our gaps are. And when you come back, we'll be asking you, so how do we enforce this? How do we make sure that in 2025, we do not have buildings collapsing? This is Fixing the Nation, one conversation at a time. Today, lest we forget, many buildings have collapsed in this country. Many people have died. As Engineer Maurice Akech, who is the Executive Director and Registrar of Contractors at the National Construction Authority, has told us, more than 200 people have died in the last 30 years or so, just from buildings collapsing, costing more than 2 billion shillings in terms of just the financial loss. What does that mean? How can we fix this so that we stop seeing cases of buildings collapsing? Keep it here. We'll be back shortly.
Machi 7 tunasherekea wanawake, tunapiga hatua kwa udhabiti na nguvu. ya anga angavu, tunaanza safari ya kusherekea wanawake wanaoongoza njia. Tunawakaribisha wanawake wote Muthaiga Golf Club kwa uzoefu wa kipekee wa mchezo wa golf. Ari ya kusonga mbele imesalia nasi, tunapong'aa kwa mtindo wa kifahari na uzuri wa kipekee. Huu ni mwendo wetu, huu ni wakati wetu. Heri ya wanawake duniani.
Many other times when we sometimes fall short of God's glory. But you know what's interesting? His love for us never ceases.
And this Sunday on Crossover, we shall be hosting Kush Tracy and Pastor Jesse Gadura as we discuss this and more.
And all you need to do is save the date and catch the show this Sunday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. only on NTV.
And this is Crossover.
With just a payslip, get a mobile loan of up to 500,000 shillings or an unsecured loan of up to 9 million shillings. Visit a Cooperative Bank branch today. Cooperative Bank. We are you.
Angela is more than capable of coming up with something to try to stop the wedding.
Do you want to risk the baby riding on the bus or on the subway or whatever? No, I will not allow it. Either I take you or you don't go.
I don't believe this. I was fooled.
What are your intentions with Luz?
I've been desperately trying to get her to marry me.
That's so nice.
Yes.
The blessing of heaven and the Father. Then of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit.
You are the one.
How do you keep your toilets clean? I use normal detergent and bleach for washing. The detergent and bleach cleanless can leave behind yellowness, rust, and germs. Harpic's 10 times better cleaning compared to regular detergents and bleach, and kills 99.9% illness-causing germs in your toilet. To clean your toilet properly, you need Harpic 10X.
In today's world, staying informed is more than just a choice. It's a necessity. Nation.Africa provides you with trusted, insightful, and engaging content to enjoy unlimited articles that go beyond the headlines. Visit Nation.Africa. Browse through the available articles and choose one that interests you. As you scroll down to read the article, you'll encounter a paywall message. To continue reading, please subscribe for full access. If you already have an account, log in using your credentials. If you're a new user, you can either create a new account by clicking register and providing your email address and other required details, or sign in with your Google ID for a quicker, hassle-free registration process. Select the subscription plan that best suits your needs and budget. Provide your payment details as prompted. You can choose between M-Pesa and card payment options. If you have a coupon or promo code, enter it in the designated field to receive a discount. Review your order details and confirm your payment. For M-Pesa, you'll be redirected to your mobile device to enter your PIN. Once your payment is successful, you'll receive a confirmation message. After completing the subscription process, you'll have immediate access to all content on Nation.Africa. Enjoy reading. Nation.Africa. Empower Africa.
Hustle is survival.
When a loved one's lost.
Catch these exciting shows only on Maisha Magic Plus on DSTV channel 163 and GoTV channel 3.
What's up, nation? My name is Jay Achungo, and currently I'm in Vihiga County. In Vihiga County right now, we are preparing for a whole new planting season, And if you go to anybody's lands, you won't miss these. We are all excited for this season because in our last season, we faced immense drought that affected our harvest. But this time round, we are very optimistic and looking forward to a bounty harvest.
Derek Asonga here, or as Eric likes to call me, Scooby Asosh from Nakuru 97.7 Nation FM. And I was wondering if you have seen headline on the Star which reads that 100 MPs head to Addis for Raila's AUC polls did they? Whatever you do with this information is entirely up to you.
I'm Felix Lemashon from Kilgoris, Narok County. I think so Donald Trump has done something good so that those money has been found in USA. We have some individual who have been putting in their pocket. I like to give Donald Trump a dance up. It is time as a country we wake up, we're doing for our own people because we are rich.
What's up nation? Ronald Dibondo here. Niko hapa na kunywa chai. I'm just waiting to go to school, manze.
Do you love the crust of bread?
I love the crust of bread.
That's
now
what,
I'm salivating.
Like this.
And then the shule maze, and that will fill him for that first session in class.
Like a foundation.
Actually, now we are hungry for no reason whatsoever.
I know, surely. Almost, Mariam. Almost.
So how do you contribute to WhatsApp Nation?
Easy as sending a video. You take it in landscape, as in Ikiwa hivi, and you tell us, hi, my name is Mariam, niko hapa Kimathi Street, and I feel like building yangu imemakiwa na X, na sijui nitapiga simu wapi.
Yeah.
Is that something I should worry about? Is that something I should be talking? Landlord amesema tuko sawa, but I don't believe them. What's up? And you send that to 0112 500 400. 0112 500 400. See a building peke yake, whatever is on your mind, whatever is disturbing you, whatever is making you happy. Kama watu wa Vihiga wana expect a bountiful harvest. If it's making you happy, let us know pia. Na utuambie what's up.
We're live everywhere. TikTok people are having a very serious debate there, and I can see people are saying, somebody saying, we have too many regulations, Bana. Too many regulations, and chuma zinatengenezwa, they are very poor quality. You know, the issues now of the materials as well that come in. Do we have issues with the quality of cement in our market, quality of steel in our market, quality of everything else that we, hata msumari unagonga mara mbili inajipinga. Do we have issues on that? That's what people are saying, and we encourage you continue that engagement and that debate on TikTok, because we are posing those questions to Maurice Akech, the Executive Director of the National Construction Authority, on Facebook as well. And Aju Akondeng Jr. is in South Sudan, capital city of Juba. He says, Niko hapa ndani, thank you very much for joining us. We're also on YouTube,
right?
Live streaming.
Yeah, on YouTube, Gilbert Peters. So tell NCA that whatever fancy documents and codes they develop, all will remain in paper and shelves so long as corruption thrives. So in Kitengela, you see NCA pickups driving around. That's Gilbert Peters on YouTube. So he's saying it's always good on paper, but as long as corruption thrives, then it doesn't really affect how we can progress construction that is safe for Kenyans, buildings that are safe for Kenyans. That's what Gilbert says.
And that's a big issue, isn't it?
It is.
Because it comes from, it's an integrity issue. If we're talking about the quality of steel being manufactured, being low, the quality of cement that's being sold in the market also having questions, the cost everywhere. By the time you're registering and licensing a contractor, and these are the materials they're going to be using, we have a big issue already. How do we fix that?
So what's the role of government, and what's the role of a regulator in government? Their role is to ensure there are standards, and the standards are well maintained so that there's quality and safety. In the absence of that, we'll have to blow the whistle. And this is what is happening. If there was no regulator, you would not know there are substandard materials. If there was no regulator, you would not know that there are things happening. But because the regulator is doing its work, people are able to be suspended or their license are denied, like many times at National Construction Authority, after the board has conducted a complete inquiry and finding points to the culpability of a contractor, that license would be suspended, sometimes even deregistered. For they will never practice again. Either they have to move from construction to farming or something else that is not construction.
So,
for me, in the absence of a regulator, what would be happening? It could be much more chaotic. So we are there to stop all these things. I think that's where we should also be strong enough. The reason why we are seeing those pickups is because they are doing their work. Of course, if those pickups were not there, people would be just going around their lives and activities without caring anything. But then they see that, at least they would say, hey, somebody passed by here. And by the way, corruption is a two, it takes two to tango, as they say, isn't it? Sometimes what happens is that you go to a site to carry out your work, the developer is not compliant, and I come, hey, wait a minute, you know, why don't you allow me to do ABCD? You know, try and mix my concrete, you know, let me use the word, that's what people are used to. Yeah. Concrete is something, yeah.
Not new, but
yeah. So, but concrete is a mix of cement, sand, ballast, and maji. Yeah. So, they say that so and I've told my officers that on the ground, whether somebody has mixed concrete or not, whether it is whatever it is, if it's not compliant, it's not compliant. So that is a lesson to anybody else like that person, isn't it? So a regulator here has played a very good role to ensure that their standards are maintained and there's quality.
What about from the constructions that, you know, we assume formality sometimes in these things, right? So zingine mtu anajenga tu their small structure to keep a roof over their head. Basics, yeah? Sitaki tu kunyeshewa, I just want somewhere where me and the children can sleep, right? What does then regulation look like for that? Ni mimi tu na vijana wa hapa tunajaribu kujenga, we have these small monies, ama tuko na mabati hapa, we have some concrete, cement, nini, we just want to put up a structure, right? Ukiniambia contractor, those are things that are beyond my financial capabilities, lakini I still need a roof over my head. Yeah.
Well, there's what we call vernacular construction. This is construction using locally available materials. It's construction that is of one level. It's just ground and walls around it and a roof over it. And those materials must be sourced from around. Yeah. So recognizing that there's what we call traditional construction, the new code embraces that. So that when we are carrying out compliance checks or quality assurance checks, we'll be using that as well to determine whether it requires that level of supervision. Remember, that is like purely like a temporary structure. That's what we are talking about. But anything that's above ground that has element of risk that can collapse on anyone, that one you must follow all the rules by the book. And whether you're constructing in the village, in the middle of your farm, or in capital city of Nairobi, we must be sure that you are safe and your construction meets all the requirements.
So for it to be vernacular, it should use locally available material.
Yes.
Mabati, locally available. Does that count?
Yeah, you can get it from a local shop because traditionally, like where I come from, those sides of western part of Kenya, they're using grass thatched, isn't it? And then on the walls, they're using sticks or maybe poles, and then they use mud, and then they cover with cow dung. Very good plastering. That's considered traditional. But if you're now going to move to something else, that its collapse will endanger your lives, that one you must comply by the rules of the book.
So no on the mabati.
Okay. I think we have some sound bites, right? These came out from a construction site. Which one did we say it was?
The one in Kaha West in October last year.
Right.
And
let's have a look. I think it's just people.
The people who are there on site and just describing and seeing what they saw as the building developed cracks and started sinking. And it was, this entire collapse was actually like televised. Everybody was there with their gadgets. So do we have it?
Nyumba ilipeana notice mapema, na wakati ilipewa notice mapema, badala watu walivaketi ndio, lakini yeye badala ambie watu wahame na haraka, yeye alianza kufanya renovation pande ya chini juu ilikuwa na go down. Juu ilikuwa na entrance mbili, ya pande ya barabara na pande ya chini. So hata ukisikia mafundi walikuwa huko ndani, hatujui kama walikuwa wametoka, lakini kulikuwa na ujenzi. Sasa alikuwa anaipiga support.
Ni mvua mingi. Alafu tungeomba watu wale wanakaa karibu na maji wakae wakihatarisha maisha yao. Juu hii mvua ni mingi. Na kulingana na vyenye iko, watu wajichunge. Maisha ni muhimu kuliko kila kitu yoyote.
There are many issues that come out of here. Number one, that there is somebody who raised the alarm and said, there's something wrong with this building. And the developer says, all right, so how can we fix the building? And they start doing repairs. And as they're doing repairs, they have not asked the tenants to move out. Then there's the issue of just everybody around and observing and monitoring, where has this building been put up? Is it a swampy area? Is it at high risk? How do you respond to all these issues, Maurice?
Well, in that whole journey of the chronology of events of that building, there's a component that you need to include. That's actually what is the story around it.
Okay.
That it collapsed, but no one lost their lives. Why? Because there was a prior action by government to ensure that people were evacuated prior to collapse. If that evacuation did not happen, today we'll be talking about a different story. So for this example you've given, maybe it's one of the best case scenario, our building collapsing without loss of life is not part of the 200 I talked about. So we appreciate the fact that somebody was able to identify a defect or a weakness and was able to raise an alarm, and the government was able to move quickly, including National Construction Authority and the law enforcement agencies, to ensure people are evacuated. And fortunately, no one lost life, but unfortunately, immediately after evacuation, the building came down.
Yeah.
Of course, the developer was trying to do some reinforcement or retrofitting to ensure they saved their building, but that did not happen. It still came down. The fundis who were there missed by a whisker. Yeah. Otherwise, they would have lost their lives.
Have you completed investigations into this collapse?
This is at the tail end. This building was built way back in 2014 or thereabout. Collapsed 10 years later. Is among the 6% of buildings that collapse after occupation or after being completed. And we are in the process of concluding investigations. In fact, the Board of National Construction Authority has set up a committee, which is a standard practice in the enshrined in law, in National Construction Authority Act under Section 22, where they have a duty to go carry out a full inquiry, interview everyone, and then come up with a report. So maybe towards by April, the report will be ready. But preliminary report also have indications that maybe that building did not have prior approvals, because we've for the board to come in, we normally do what we call preliminary investigations.
Okay.
But if you look at all that, it's not coming. But maybe we wait for this inquiry to complete its task, inquiry committee, so that we can now finally say with finality that there was no approval, there was no contractor, and there was no engineer on it.
Right.
Yeah.
There are several incidences where people will be happily living, going about their business. The landlord had a grand plan of 4 floors, but Pesa Ikasimama at some point decided to finish 2. The 2 are occupied, and then at some point decides, wacha tuongeze. Is that legal to be constructing with people living in any occupied building, whether it is office, residential, etc.?
Well, when you look at safety around construction, construction site and a building that's occupied, those should be 2 separate items. So if you want to work on a building that's already occupied, then you have to move people out, continue the construction until it's finished. Unless maybe that construction, there are 2 types of extension. Extension on top,
right,
which you cannot do
while
people are inside. And there's extension on the side. That one you have to properly hold it, make it a totally secure and hoarded construction site while people are occupying this other one, with all the safety routes well defined. So where you are extending on top, you have to move people out. And of course, when you're extending on top, if you started, it's a 4-story building which was approved, but you did the first 2, maybe by the time you're going back to extend,
right.
The approval has expired, because this approval have are time bound, or they have an expiry period. Like if you go to the county for approval, they give you a limit of about 24 months. If you're not able to finish within that time, you have to ask for extension for approval, because many things may have changed, and so on and so forth. So it's illegal to extend a building while people are occupying it. Okay. It is also illegal to extend a building beyond the approved floor numbers, and that's where now the gap also exists, where people, maybe they were approved for 4 floors, but later they realize, money has started coming in. So let me continue extending, and yet it was not approved, even within the construction period before it's occupied.
Right.
That is illegal, and that's one of also the major causes of collapsing, because our legs, for instance, is designed for our weight by nature.
Yeah.
If you're going to add more people on you, the legs cannot carry the same thing of a foundation.
But how does a concerned Kenyan address these issues? Right. There's somebody right now, I think there's somebody here on YouTube, Willie Mayoli. There is a building that just got completed in my area. It has started developing cracks. The few people who had rented or vacated the building, later on the building was marked for demolition. I know there's part two. As at today, the building I'm talking about has been repainted, and unsuspecting tenants are allowed to rent. Why wasn't it demolished? When is it deemed not fit? This is a disaster in waiting. So, yes, similar to what Mariam raised is, number one, there's somebody who is living in a building and then construction is taking place. So obviously you've mentioned it's illegal. Who can they report it to? And to Willie's point, this still continues unabated. A lot of people are still really cutting corners. So where can the public reach out to? Which line, which office to report? Are they sure that there's going to be follow through? How do you ensure that people will come and address the issue?
Well, let me start with the last one. We have many reporting channels at the National Construction Authority, because we are living in the digital age, the digital era, where you have a phone, and if you have internet, you just go to the website, you pick our number, which is a line that is operated, and we have, what do you call it?
Toll free.
It's a customer service. It's a helpline, whatever. What do you call it? It's
emergency line? No.
What do you call it? There's a contact line on our website. Okay. We also have X. We also have Facebook, and all these social media channels exist for use. But we also say, because we work collaboratively with other agencies, even if you report it to the station, you'll still get to reach us, because the police exist around the entire nation. But also, we have our offices across the country. If you are near any Huduma Center, in case you are not willing to make a call, you go to any Huduma Center near you, you'll find NCA desk, and you can still make that report. That's the closest we are to wananchi. But we can be reached through Huduma Center, our lines on the website, our social media channels, as well as any other agency of government. When you reach them, they'll be able to reach us, because we have a very strong multi-agency team that works together. But if it is important also, if I could know where that building is, because I know there are instances where cracks have occurred, and by the cracks could be an indicator of an unsafe building. But I also want to distinguish between a crack that is developing after a building has been built, but there's also a permanent crack, which sometimes make people raise alarm, but is by design. We call them expansion joints. If you go to like these big expansive buildings, like commercial buildings, you'll always see something looking like a crack. But it's by design so that when it is hot, the building is expected to expand. When it is cold, it's expected to shrink. That's the place where it's supposed to breathe.
But how can you tell the difference? Somebody just sees a crack as a crack.
Layman,
If you see a very straight line on the floor, all the way on the walls or columns, know that's a design. There is no crack that can be straight like that.
Either way, I can just see the panic coming into my eyes if I go there and just
But it also must be continuous across the floor. But importantly, if you see a crack that is looking like it's rugged, either vertically or diagonally, across the windows, mostly on beams are these things that are crossing from one pillar to another pillar. And on a slab, just raise the alarm. And if you're not sure, raise the alarm. And most importantly, if you've been living in a building where doors have been opening throughout, but one day the doors refuse to open. Why have they refused to open? Because something has happened. The building has moved. Either it has started settling, so you are now struggling to open the door, or the door is not opening at all or closing. That's an indication of maybe there's no crack, but the building has moved a bit, and it has caused those openings to shrink or expand. So if you see all those things, just report, and our officers will be able to move in quickly. But
Yeah,
if
so
I
you
knew
don't
that
have
building
a
is,
number that's a toll-free number that one can just
You can
cram.
just call,
Because I'm looking at your website, and I have to scroll all the way down.
Just go to contact on the website.
Aisha Wangeshi had,
Would you
was able
know
to
the
actually
number
take
if we
this.
read it out? There's
Yes.
a 020-271-2096.
That's one of them. There are two.
That's headquarters.
Yes.
Nairobi says 0701-913-723.
Yes.
Is that the one?
There are two, yeah. Did you find two? There's supposed to be two.
I just, it was just,
Yeah.
at least Eric is in the website, which
On the website,
it's, navigating it is very complex. But I think, I know that time will end soon, but I believe it's critical to try and leave a number that we can share with the audience.
0709 126 102 stroke 172 stroke 173.
Yeah,
that sounds
That's
like the one.
0709 126 102 stroke 172 stroke 173.
Correct.
So this is the number that I call if I see anything that I suspect is an issue,
Yes.
to raise an alarm.
Yes.
This is also the number that I'll call if I wanted to talk to Engineer Maurice Akech.
Yes.
It's also the number that I'd call if I wanted to speak to somebody, a friend of mine who works at NCA. It's also the number that I'll call if I wanted to ask, kuna kazi? So is there a number dedicated
line,
to hotline? This is a hotline number. If there's an issue, it's an emergency, the building has started collapsing, it's crack, and I can call this number. It's manned 24/7. I can reach you.
We're working on a toll-free line that members of the public can reach, and when you call it, we know it's an emergency.
When will it be
That's
ready?
coming up.
Do we know when it will be ready?
That's coming up.
Coming.
When,
Timeline.
Bwana?
Timestamp.
No timeline.
Timeline, a month, 2 months?
No,
3?
that's coming up. I know I'm
Engineer,
working on
make a
it.
commitment.
Okay, can I say it will be out in 3 months? Because I know there's some work going on. You know, these things are normally done through some
Okay.
kind of...
Then that comes into our final question. Let's just combine two final questions here.
Right.
Renson Kyoge had asked, how is NCA funded? Do you have enough capacity? How much did you raise in the last financial year? What's the turnaround period for an application? Those are many questions. Let's talk about the funding bit. Do you have sufficient budget to run your office and to inspect all buildings under construction today?
Well, I need to say that when NCA started, we used to have our own source revenue, which, as you know, was set aside in 2017. This was a construction levy, which was charging 0.5% of any project whose value is above 5 million, given that maybe anything below 5 million is left to the common mwananchi, the hustler. Right. But anything above 5 million was being charged. And any type of project, whether it's in buildings or any other sector. Now, after that, 2017, we are now relying on government or exchequer, National Treasury, to fund us. But we still have a small component that we get from our own source. Like when we license contractors, we charge a fee. When we train contractors, we also charge a fee because we also do capacity building and training of contractors. And so that is our own source. But that contributes a small percentage compared to what we get from National Treasury. If we have a way of getting this levy back, I think we'll be at a good position to get to where we want. Because most importantly, recently we had reviewed human resource instruments that allows us as National Construction Authority to to have enough human across the country, but to see that requires some funding to be able to onboard additional numbers. But in terms of the spread, as we speak now, we have a presence in all more than 50 Huduma centers across the country. We have a presence in all 27 counties, we call them regions. But in the long run, we need to be in all the counties in terms of offices. And then we have online. Our services are online, which means with online, the process is more efficient, is more effective, and we're able to have a good turnaround time. In terms of how long it takes for application, we have three types of applications. you can apply to be a contractor. That we give a commitment of 7 days as per our service charter. We have application to have a project get registered. I think that one we also give a commitment of about also 7 days or thereabout. Then we have a commitment also to register fundis or accredited fundis. That also as I think the minimum time. But our service charter gives a commitment to the mwananchi on how long we take for our services. And all these things are online, which means from the comfort of your desk, as long as you have a phone, you're able to apply. And you don't need to know anyone. That's the beauty of it again. You don't need to know Akech, you don't need to know any of my officers. As long as you apply, we'll process. Because we have a commitment on the timelines of delivery, we'll be able to process and give you your license.
We have extended time completely, like by 4 minutes, and there are very many questions to ask you, very many comments also coming in. People are asking very many questions. We're going to pose all this to you, so you can go in, you can ask your officers to go into our YouTube page and respond as NCA, to respond to all of this on YouTube, on Facebook, on TikTok as well. People are asking questions, right?
Right. What's the essence of reporting to NCA if when they visit the site and mark a building for demolition, then painting does magic? Maybe someone can reply right there on the YouTube thread. Because yes, paint can just wash away our sins, quote unquote. We have to take a short break.
Unscrupulous, developers.
Yes.
Engineer Maurice Akech has been our guest for this hour. Engineer Akech is the Executive Director and the Registrar of Contractors at the National Construction Authority. Lest we forget, buildings have been collapsing, and he says the work that they are doing is to ensure that we reduce that number to 0 and completely ensure buildings are not collapsing because of being unsafe. Keep it here for more conversations coming up. We are fixing the nation, one conversation at a time.